The 2100 BC Project. For those who are familiar with the 1619 Project, it is the attempt by the New York Times to claim that the one of the most unique things about America is its practice of slavery. They then say America today uniquely practices capitalism, therefore slavery is inherently intertwined with capitalism. Here is a brief translation of four laws from the Code of Ur-Nammu from Mesopotamia, somewhere between 2100 BC and 2050 BC. It's the oldest legal code known to the human race. If a slave marries a slave and that slave is set free, he does not leave the household. If a slave marries a native, i.e., free person, she is to hand the firstborn son over to the owner. There are many more like this. The point is that slavery is one of the least unique things about America, as Thomas Sowell says in a book titled Economic Facts and Fallacies. For centuries before, Europeans had enslaved other Europeans, Asians had enslaved other Asians, and Africans had enslaved other Africans. Only in the modern era was there both the wealth and technology to organize the mass transportation of people across the ocean, either as slaves or as free immigrants. Nor were Europeans the only ones to transport masses of enslaved human beings from one continent to another. North Africa's Barbary Coast pirates alone captured and enslaved at least 1 million Europeans from 1500 to 1800, carrying more Europeans into bondage in North America than there were Africans brought in bondage to the United States and to the American colonies from which it was formed. Moreover, Europeans were still being bought and sold in the slave markets of the Islamic world decades after blacks were freed in the United States. Slavery was a virtually universal institution in countries around the world and for thousands of years of recorded history. Indeed, archaeological evidence suggests that human beings learned to enslave other human beings before they learned to write. One of the many fallacies about slavery, that it was based on race, is sustained by the simple but pervasive practice of focusing exclusively on the enslavement of Africans by Europeans, as if this were something unique rather than a part of a much larger worldwide human tragedy. Racism grew out of African slavery, especially in the United States, but slavery preceded racism by thousands of years. Europeans enslaved other Europeans for centuries before the first African was brought into bondage into the Western Hemisphere. The reason that is important is because when people think of slavery, they'll often say unpaid labor or free labor. Was not free to house and clothe people and feed them for centuries at a time. It was costly. And there's nothing wrong with volunteer work, which is also unpaid labor. And if the problem is just skin color and we're focusing on something that trivial, well, then we don't have a principled objection to races enslaving members of their own race until you get to the fact that it's wrong to initiate violence against peaceful people. We're always going to have this fight with no end in sight.